Spider-Man hasn't only saved lives, but has also saved the whole animation industry. Through this video essay, I will provide a brief history of both traditional 2D animation and 3D computer-generated animation, detailing the rise of style in animation, the fall of style, and the rise again. By the end of this essay, you will have learned how Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse saved stylized animation in the film industry.
Oh dear. I wonder if the children are... Oh!
In the 1930s, Disney pioneered the way in animated videography. Mickey Mouse was a worldwide recognized symbol, and animated shorts starring him and other characters were massively popular. However, believing more money could be made in the full-length feature film industry, in 1934 Disney began production on America's first ever traditionally animated full-length feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The film was complex and expensive to make, costing just under $1.5 million and being entirely composed of hand-drawn cell animation. However, upon release in late 1937, the film was a grand success, earning $7.8 million in international box office receipts by the end of its original theatrical run. Snow White briefly became the highest-grossing sound film ever. From then on, Walt Disney Productions dominated the animated film industry. Throughout the rest of the 20th century, Disney would be a giant in the field of animation, creating cult classics such as Bambi, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, The Jungle Book, The Lion King, Aladdin, and many more. Other companies such as Columbia Pictures and Warner Bros. Animation had some success as well, but no one could compare to the mammoth that was Walt Disney Productions. This era of animation was special because almost every traditionally animated film made during this era was hand-drawn and animated by countless number of artists. Animation was chosen as a medium not because of the ease it was to work with, but because of the stories that could be conveyed with it. Filmmakers could tell fantastical stories without having the anchor of the real world. Every film was made with passion, and every visual detail was purposefully placed by an artist. However, the industry would forever change with the success of a little film starring Tom Hanks and the massive failure of one of Disney's last 2D animated features.
Hey, Buzz! You're flying!
This isn't flying, this is falling with style.
The early 90s were arguably the peak of Disney's animated success. Disney had hit after hit with Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and of course, The Lion King. However, during all of this time, something was brewing in a new studio called Pixar Animation Studios. Owned by Steve Jobs and collaborating with Disney, Pixar hired a man named John Lasseter to create a new kind of animated feature film, 3D CG animation. After years of rocky development, on November 19, 1995, Pixar finally released its first full-length CG animated feature film, Toy Story. This film shook the film world to its core, grossing over $373 million worldwide and receiving high praise from critics and audiences alike. Many would consider this film to be one of the best animated movies of all time. But, most importantly, this film proved to every animation studio that CG animated films weren't only possible, but very lucrative. Within the next few years, 2D and 3D animated movies would somewhat live in unison. Disney would have success with traditional 2D movies like Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan, while Pixar would have massive success with A Bug's Life and Toy Story 2. Other studios even got a slice of the CG animation pie, with Dreamworks releasing Antz in 1998. However, this balanced coexistence wouldn't last forever, as studios began seeing the massive popularity of CG animated movies and the slow decline of traditionally animated films. Movies such as The Road to El Dorado, The Emperor's New Groove, and Atlantis: The Lost Empire weren't as popular as animated movies once were, and it certainly didn't help that in 2001, DreamWorks released their titan to compete with Pixar, Shrek, which won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature Film. Yet the real nail in the coffin occurred in 2002 with Disney's release of Treasure Planet. Based on the original Treasure Island story, Treasure Planet was a sci-fi-esque retelling where a young Jim Hawkins goes on a quest to find the legendary Treasure Planet. The film was given a budget of $140 million and was the most expensive traditionally animated film to ever be made. The film was unique in the sense that it combined mostly traditionally animated visuals with computer-generated CG animation. It was wildly complex to make and was dependent on a massive theatrical success. However, upon release, the movie flopped, only earning $38 million in US and Canada while making $110 million worldwide. Many believe the cause of this failure to be poor marketing, while others believe it to be Disney intentionally sabotaging 2D animation. Nevertheless, this was the point where most faith in 2D animation was lost, and 3D animation took the stage. Economically, traditional 2D animation was viewed as more expensive and less lucrative, and to many, Treasure Planet proved that. From this point on, stylized animation began to diminish in favor of realism and a proven formula. More and more companies created CG animated films, and unfortunately, many of them began to look the same and devoid of style. As companies kept pumping out films, the choice of animation style became less of a focus. This isn't to say that fantastic animated movies weren't made during this time, as these films were some of the best ever, but they often could have been more fantastic if more thought was put into animation choices. Animation also became a cheap way to capitalize on the child audience. Within the last 20 years, the sentiment that animated films are only for kids has grown. However, thanks to a 2018 release, stylized animation would prove it has not been lost forever.
Like, what's up, danger? Like, what's up, danger? Like, what's up, danger?
It's difficult to believe that the same studio that created the Emoji Movie a year prior turned around and created one of the best animated films of all time. Produced by Sony Pictures Animation and Columbia Pictures, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse hit the big screen in late 2018, and the film was a massive success, grossing $384.3 million worldwide against a $90 million budget. Immediately upon viewing this film, it is quite clear that the creators of this movie weren't using animation as a genre, but instead a medium that they sculpted into their own. It's obvious that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was not like any other CG animated film, but instead stood in a league of its own. Every scene of this movie looks like it was ripped straight from a comic book, and every character is oozing with personality simply based on their designs alone. In an interview, VFX supervisor for the film, Danny Damian, said the following: "We wanted the film to have a hand-drawn look because one of the things that's really beautiful and interesting about illustration is a freedom to draw what is most emotional and impactful without being constrained by realism or what is correct. To achieve this effect, the animation team at Sony did not use traditional CGI animation, but instead used a variety of rendering styles mixed with hand-drawn aspects. Some aspects of design that they focused on were graphic shapes, bold colors, strong composition, and simplified design. The animators also animated on 2s instead of 1s to give the film a comic book-like feel. Most importantly, the animators weren't afraid to break away from the traditional animated style and try something new. In the 4 years it took to develop the movie, the team had to reinvent the whole animation pipeline for it to work. And yet, they succeeded. Into the Spider-Verse is the most obvious love letter to animation that I've ever seen, and the success of this film has started a new wave of stylized 3D animation across the industry. Since Spider-Verse's release, other animation studios have followed suit. Two specific examples are DreamWorks' Puss in Boots: The Last Wish 2022 and Nickelodeon's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem, which has yet to be released. Compared to the previous titles from the same franchises, the animation for each of these films has entirely changed. However, these changes were not meaningless. In the case of Puss in Boots and The Last Wish, the animation style was changed to better match the fairy tale setting of the movie. VFX supervisor Mark Edwards said the following: "Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is a perfect example of this collaboration. taking the concept of a fairy tale painting and running with it across all departments, implementing hundreds of small artistic tweaks to create something new. Yet again, the entire pipeline had to be recreated, but it was worth it. The film grossed $482 million worldwide on a production budget of around $100 million. And although not yet released, Nickelodeon's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem seems to be taking a similar approach. The trailer simply oozes with style, reminiscent of New York and graffiti. As more time passes since the release of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, more unique stylized animated films will continue to be released. It also certainly helps that a sequel to Spider-Verse is coming out this year. And that is the story of how Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse saved stylized animation in film.